slide is effectively Cohort PLC on a page. The first part, which is extracted from our mission statement, is the Cohort concept in a sentence. We combine the innovation and responsiveness of smaller independent businesses with the stability, shared knowledge, wider market access, and lower funding costs of a listed group. So we're a group of 6 operating businesses, all SME-sized, small to medium-sized enterprises, highly customer-focused, and with a strong element of technological innovation. And we started off in 2006 with a single business, and we've grown gradually, both organically and by acquisition since then. And within the group, the businesses operate with a high level of autonomy. We select our executives at the operating level very carefully, and we delegate a significant degree of freedom over day-to-day business and development of strategy. And that, of course, takes place in a framework of governance controls to ensure that we manage funds properly, that we produce accurate results, and that we comply with the many laws and regulations affecting our sector and listed companies more widely. And our businesses are helped by our small but highly experienced headquarters team. There are only 15 of us, but several of us in the headquarters team, notably the executive and non-executive board members, have many years' experience in the sector. We don't provide central services like human resources or marketing or engineering. It's up to the businesses to shape and resource themselves according to their particular needs. So what is it we actually do? Well, we operate primarily in the defence sector, offering a range of products and services. And our experience is that being agile and innovative and small, like our businesses, provides a strong competitive advantage. And because in our sector, it is dominated by large, slow, conservative customers and suppliers. And in addition, not having a large coordinating layer between operational managing directors and the headquarters team helps make us cost effective and cost competitive as well. The UK is our largest single customer. It was about 54% of revenue last year went to the UK government either directly or indirectly. But we're also a strong exporter into NATO Europe, into Southeast Asia, into the Middle East, and into the Americas as well. And in terms of size, we're about 1,200 people, of which, as I say, 15 are in the headquarters. The large majority of those people have advanced technology qualifications because primarily that's how we add value for our customers. And we operate across 12 different sites in the UK and in Europe. Market capitalisation is about £200 million. Revenue last year was about 180 million. Our order book, as of last month, was 370. To give you an idea of size. And this slide shows our development since we IPO'd in 2006. We started with just one operating business. I'm not going to talk through all of this in great detail. We started with one operating business. We've grown now to 6. The largest acquisition was SEA in 2007, which is about £25 million. Most of the others have been between 10 and 20 million. So, for example, Mass at 13 million and MCL at 14 million. And as well as adding members to the group, we've done bolt-in acquisitions as well, like Abacus into Mass in 2010 and JNS into SEA. And we've been prepared to dispose of or restructure businesses where that's made sense as well. I think quite importantly, apart from employee share schemes, we've not issued shares at all since 2007. So all of the acquisitions that we've made since SEA have been done with a combination of bank debt and our own cash flow. Over that period, since then, we've returned something like £35 million to shareholders through dividends, growing the dividend every year. And at the end of August, we had net cash of over 15 million on the balance sheet. And so this next slide summarises our most recent set of full-year results, and they cover the year ending 30th of April 2023. And it was a good year for us. We had a record level of revenue and a record level of profit. Our revenue was up a third, profit nearly a quarter compared to the preceding year. And it was especially pleasing to me that even against that record level of revenue, the order intake at nearly £221 million was considerably higher. And a book-to-bill ratio of more than 1 is a good indicator of future growth, I think, for us. And that left us at the end of the year with an order book just shy of £330 million, covering about 80% of what analysts expect our revenue to be in the current 23-24 financial year. And by the time of our AGM a few weeks ago, we've taken on another 90 million of order intake, and so our order book had gone up to 370 million, giving us 93% revenue cover for the year as a whole. Net funds flow last year was strong, bringing us to a net funds position of 15.6 million by the year end, and we have very strong support from the banks, and that gives us a lot of flexibility to invest or make acquisitions. And on the back of those good results, we increased the dividend by 10%. As I mentioned, that's dividends increased every year since we floated back in 2006. So to get a little further into the detail, this year, for the first time, we reported in 2 divisions, communications and intelligence and sensors and effectors. And we think that doing it that way provides a clearer and simpler presentation than going through 6 separate profit sectors in all of that detail laboriously. But let me talk you through the 6 businesses so you can understand a little bit about what it is we do. And I'll start with the communications and intelligence division. So EID first, that's our Portuguese business based just outside Lisbon. And they provide communication systems for naval ships, which have been exported very widely all over the world. And they also provide army communications for headquarters, for vehicles, and for individual soldiers. Portugal has got the advantage of having a very strong technical education system combined with what is a low cost base compared to most of Europe. And that allows EID to offer really world-class systems at very competitive prices indeed. Next, MASS, which is based in Cambridgeshire and Lincoln, is our defence services business, and it's the largest contributor to the group's profit overall. And MASS provides software and training in the area of electronic warfare, including the development of countermeasures to protect ships and aircraft from missile attack. It has a training support division that designs and executes large-scale exercises for the UK Strategic Command, simulating an international crisis and the UK's military and wider government response to that. And MASS also provides cyber defence services to the UK government and operational support to the UK's strategic deterrent. And finally, in this division, MCL, based in Surrey, which is our smallest business in employment terms, with less than 50 people, although it had a very successful year last year, and in fact was our biggest contributor to revenue. Now, MCL has a very different business model in that it partners with overseas technology businesses to bring their products and technologies to UK government customers. MCL has a capable engineering team that can modify equipment for UK use or integrate it into UK ships and submarines and vehicles and so on. A very good example is their partnership with a Danish company, Invisio, which has supplied the British Army with many thousands of soldier hearing protection systems through MCL. And then turning to the sensors and effectors division, Chess is based in Sussex, and Chess provides stabilized electro-optical sensors for surveillance, tracking, and fire control. And their systems can be used on fixed land surveillance posts. Example would be the one that's poking out of a container on the picture on the left. They can also be used on armored vehicles and indeed on ships. Chess exports to many countries around the world. It's one of the few UK defence businesses which actually succeeds in exporting to France, which I think is quite a feather in their cap. One especially important role for their is countering drones, which, as you can imagine, are regarded as a very high level of threat at the moment. And Chess systems are used by some of the world's leading weapons companies exactly for that purpose. And next, ELAC Sonar. They're based in Kiel, and they're one of Europe's leading sonar providers. And they supply, and sonar, of course, is the equipment you use for detecting submarines under the surface of the water and surface ships if you're on a submarine. And ELAC supplying the sonar for the new fleet of Italian submarines that are being built by Fincantieri in Genoa at the moment. And they've done that for submarines in Asia as well, and for surface ships too. And the huge investment, I'll say more about the market in a moment, but the huge investment that China is making, its Navy and the new submarines, mean that anti-submarine warfare is a very important technology at the moment, and demand is growing for that. And then finally, in this division, SEA. SEA makes a range of maritime equipment, including the communication systems used by all of the Royal Navy's nuclear submarines. And they recently had a big defence exhibition in London, unveiled their new system for protecting naval ships against the threat of hypersonic missiles, which you may have heard something about on the news in recent years. And their system is a decoy launcher that very swiftly rotates and elevates to fire a pattern of decoys to distract a missile. And it can do that without the ship having to maneuver at all. And hypersonic missiles come in so quickly that you can only have a matter of seconds to respond to an incoming attack. And so being able to do that rapidly without having time to maneuver the ship can be the difference between the ship being hit and the ship surviving. So if you look at the charts on the right of this slide, those show the contribution of the two divisions to revenue, profit, and the order book last year. Although sensors and effectors generated more than half of the revenue, communications and intelligence was considerably more profitable. And that was down to a combination of very strong performances in MCL, it was very good last year. The usual very high operating margin of MAS, which has some unique capabilities. And in contrast, also over at sensors and effectors, disappointing profitability at chess. Now, over the coming years, we're going to be looking to push the sensors and effectors division their margin up considerably beyond where it is at the moment, which is sort of hovering just below 10%. We think we can achieve a margin getting much closer to 15% over the next few years there. And that will have, on its own, quite a significant profit impact. The order book is strong in both divisions, as you can see, but especially so in the sensors and effectors. And that reflects growing demand for those products on the world market, as well as the large long-term nature of maritime projects. And quite a lot of their workload is made up of maritime projects for ships and submarines. So moving on to the next slide, this shows the group's trading history for the last 5 years. You can see we've made steady progress in terms of revenue and profit. External analysts say that we should continue to grow in the current year, and that growth should accelerate next year and beyond. And you can also see that we had a bit of a dip in performance last year, and you may have noticed that that's had a bit of a lingering effect on the share price. To a certain extent, that was a post-COVID hangover, but it also reflected some problem projects mentioned that we had at chess, and a bit of a drop-off in performance at EID as well. But more widely, defence does work on large projects and long timescales, and so the beginning and end of individual contracts in a particular year can have an impact on the group as a whole. But that said, we've grown pretty steadily since the IPO. I think only 2 year-on-year dips in profit, and so we've been pretty consistent in our growth despite that. Now, before we finish up, I wanted to talk a little about the factors that are driving demand for our product and why I think we're growing. And at the geopolitical level, there are 2 primary ones. The war in Ukraine is one, and Chinese expansionism in Asia is the other. An experience that people are gathering in Ukraine is driving a re-evaluation of equipment and tactics by NATO countries and indeed beyond. It's especially relevant to drones and counter-drone systems, communications, to intelligence, and to electronic warfare, amongst other areas. And in China and the Pacific and Indian Ocean, huge Chinese investment in the Navy, and especially the aggressive use of those naval assets in the South China Sea, has had a very big effect on defence postures from the Indian Ocean all the way to the Pacific. So how did that affect us? Well, looking at our domestic markets, the UK has recently refreshed its integrated defence and security review. and it unsurprisingly identifies Russia as being the nearest and most pressing threat, and is responding to that by changing its investment priorities, building industrial capacity and stockpiles, and supplying large amounts of equipment to Ukraine. But it also recognises China as a longer term, but perhaps even greater threat. The UK is a country with global relationships, global supply chains, and I think it's fair to say global influence. And all of that is put at risk if China upsets the world order in Asia by continuing aggressiveness in Southeast Asia, or even worse, by invading Taiwan. The most obvious manifestation of the UK's response to this is AUKUS, the trilateral pact to build a common nuclear submarine with the UK and Australia, and with the US as well. Now, I'm confident that Cohort will have a significant part to play in that, as we have with the UK's existing nuclear submarine fleet. And AUKUS also covers a broad range of other technologies that all three partners are investing in, which are very relevant to us, including artificial intelligence and seabed warfare, amongst other areas. And in our other domestic markets, Germany has announced a steadily increasing core defence budget, and with a €100 billion top-up fund to reverse the hollowing out of its forces that's happened over. And we see the impact of that in more orders from Germany for Iraq. And in Portugal, after a pretty long delay, several important defence projects are finally getting underway, including building 6 new naval ships, which have got EID, or will have, which will have EID equipment on board. And we see a similar sort of impact in export markets. So the new and existing NATO members are looking to increase their level of defence spending up to or beyond the NATO target of 2% of GDP. And we've seen the result with NATO customers adding to existing orders or increasing their scope. For example, we've been supplying surveillance systems from Chess up in Norway for use not far from its Russian border recently. In Asia, we've seen strong demand, especially for anti-submarine warfare and electronic warfare technology as well. So to summarise all of this, we see a positive market picture with major demand drivers likely to remain in place for many years to come, because these are not going on. And that's the reason why our order intake has been so strong. It's the reason why 2023 was a good year, and it's the reason why we're confident about the future. So that's more or less what I wanted to say. Let me leave you with this quote from our AGM statement, which was released just a few weeks ago. Following contract wins since the start of the financial year of over £90 million, the order book on 22nd September was £370 million, with getting revenue cover of 93%. Following the increased level of activity of the UK MOD last year, that strong momentum has continued into the first quarter, and we have good prospects to secure further long-term orders for our naval systems and support work, both from the UK MOD and in export markets. Overall, an encouraging start to the financial year, and our expectations for the full year remain unchanged. Well, I hope you'll have gathered from the tone of that we feel positive about the future. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'll be very happy to try and answer any questions.
I think this question is relevant. It's a collection of 6 businesses, so what are the cross-selling opportunities? For example, do the electronics and surveillance customers also want data services?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The way we work is that I have a pretty strict approach to saying that I do not force our businesses to cooperate together, because my experience is that it is much better to find the right partner for a particular opportunity than it is to try and do it in-house. And the basis of that is, winning 50% of a decent-sized program is much better than losing 75% of it because you've got the wrong partner. However, as you'll have spotted from what I said, there are plenty of sort of close connections between our businesses. And so what we do is we have very regular intelligence sharing and knowledge sharing sessions on a quarterly basis between the MDs of all our businesses. And we encourage them to develop an atmosphere of trust and cooperation and knowledge. And that's resulted in a number of really quite substantial cooperations between our group businesses. So it turns out that there are plenty of opportunities if we approach it the right way.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Could you please comment on profit margins 23 versus 22 and threats to margins going forward as governments cut defence budgets as Europe enters a recession?
Okay. Yeah, well, the margin this year was down a little bit compared to last year. The main reason for that is mix, and particularly a lower contribution from mass, which is our largest single contributor to margin. So mass is our highest margin business, and it does fluctuate year on year. But as I explained, we are looking to enhance the margin of our sensors and effectors division, which at the moment is held down a little bit by the fact that chess, although decently profitable, is not really achieving what I think it can achieve, and we're working closely with them to improve that. And I think we also see room for improvement in the other two businesses in that area. Elax will be held down for a little bit while it works on this very large Italian project, which we're trading very cautiously because it's a large project with a lot of technical development in it. And when we get to the end of that, we'll release the contingency we can. But I want to make sure that we're through the risk before we do that. So threats as Europe reduces defence spending. Well, that's not how I see it at the moment. I mean, of course, government expenditure is it's bound to be constrained by the amount of cash that they have available. But bigger factors are afoot at the moment as well, and we've seen that as we've gone through very difficult times through COVID, strong commitments to increasing defence expenditure. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in Ukraine, what the outcome is going to be, although it certainly looks like the conflict is going to continue for some time. But I think whatever the outcome in terms of territory and what kind of conditions are reached for the active conflict to stop, you're going to see a hostile border once again in the centre of Europe, taking us back to the situation that some of us can remember pre-1989. And what that indicates is a secular, long-term level of defence expenditure considerably higher than it's been in the period between 1990 and now. And I would expect that to continue as a long-term trend.
Okay. I think we've got time for a couple more. If you can make them just slightly shorter in your answers, and it'd be appreciated.
I'll do my best.
Your shares have a challenging spread of 3.2%. Do you have any plans to look at reducing this?
Well, we're very. I mean, well, this is one of them. We're keen to enhance liquidity by getting the word out there, so please go and buy some. But I mean, we're on AIM. It is what it is. I'm afraid liquidity is not as high as I would like it to be. We do. I mean, that's the flip side of us having a very strong set of institutional shareholders. I should say you don't sell very often.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it as more.
Okay. You have 25 million of debt. What is the term, maturity date, and interest rate on this?
And we've actually got 15 million of net cash. So the gross debt is, I mean, some of it's on overdrafts, which we have for basically currency reasons, but the majority of it is not debt at all, but things like customer guarantees, advance payment guarantees, and so on, which are a necessary part of doing business. And our banks see it as capital allocation, but it certainly isn't debt. We have a very close relationship with our banks. I think we've got, a new 3-year term on about 50 million facility at the moment, which it will certainly be renewed. But the main use we make of that is actually for those commercial instruments.
Okay, I'll squeeze one more in with you, Andy, if I could quickly. What value is achieved by having the companies under the umbrella of Cohort as opposed to remaining independent?
Oh, well, that was in the very first slide, because
that's fine.
The problem is businesses, the problem is the businesses don't have financial backing, they don't have the expertise, they don't have the ability to access high-level customers that they do as part of the group.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Andy.